Hey everybody, this is Sam and welcome to the production process. This is going to be a general overall breakdown of what the production process actually is and how to use it. So let's just jump on in. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to understand the production process, understand what to focus on each step, and go over how to use the production process to improve our music. So what is the production process? Well, there are 3 steps. Okay, that's going to be pre-production, production, and post-production. And this is more of a traditional workflow, meaning the pre-production goes into the production and then we do post-production. Okay. Another way to think about that is that we plan everything, then we actually do it, and then we finalize it. So what do we want to focus on when we're in the pre-production stage? Let's take a look. During pre-production, focus on these 3 elements: melody, harmony, and rhythm. That's it. Another way to think about this is to just keep it simple. So we should really think about the piano and the melody, the piano and a vocal, or just a guitar and a vocal. Meaning we're not going to be chasing sounds or anything like that. What we really want to focus on during this step is the root of the song or the actual foundation that everything is pushing off of. Cool. Let's keep going. So what do we want to focus on during the production? Instrumentation, arrangement, and performance. Okay. And we're going to get a little bit more into those on what they actually are. Let's get going. So the instrumentation and the sounds categories, everything sort of falls into either drums, percussion, bass, keys, synths, guitars, background vocals, or BGVs for short, and vocals. And the reason why it's important to categorize things is just to help us stay organized when we're working, okay? Just to help us either in the session or when we're thinking about what needs to go where during the pre-production process, during like a demo or anything like that. We just want to make sure that we know what we're dealing with. All right, let's keep going. So what is arrangement? Well, arrangement is simply how instruments and sounds work together. Another way to think about this is how everything is sort of supporting that main idea from the very beginning. And note, this is when it should start to sound like a record. And the performance is the most important aspect, okay? So things to listen for. We want to listen for timing and feel, dynamics, or how loud or how soft things are, pitch, notes, and the emotional output. And this is where it gets interesting because if the performance isn't good, the gear that you use actually doesn't matter. Okay, so let's keep going. And here are the things that we want to focus on during the post-production process. We want to do editing, mixing, and mastering. So editing, what is it? It's the art of manipulating audio and or MIDI as a tool to better communicate the emotional intent of a production. And the reason why we say it this way is because editing can be applied in many different ways depending on the situation. And what we really want to focus on is how we're using it to better support what we're trying to end up with at the end of the day, or how the production needs to sound or needs to feel. Cool. So what is mixing? Well, mixing is the balancing of individual tracks and or instruments to better support and or enhance the emotional intent of the production. And this is where we have all the individual elements of a mix themselves or of a song, right? So this is where we get to balance everything. This is where we get to use EQ or compression and reverb and all that kind of stuff. Cool. So let's keep going. Well, what tools do we have? Well, we have harmonic processing, dynamic processing, modulation effects, time-based effects, and automation. And just a reminder, we will be breaking all of these down in level 1. And mastering, the final step of the production process. So what actually is mastering? Well, mastering is the art of ensuring that the emotional intention of a mix is felt on all listening environments, as well as from song to song on an EP or album. So what does that mean? Well, typically when we have an EP or an album, we have multiple songs that don't necessarily sound exactly the same because they're different songs, different productions, all that kind of stuff. So what a mastering engineer does is actually balances all those to make them feel like they belong on the record. Cool, let's keep going. And what tools do we use for mastering? Well, we have harmonic processing, dynamic processing, modulation, time-based effects, and automation. And if you're thinking those are similar to mixing, you're not wrong. So the question to answer here is if the tools from mixing to mastering do not change, then what is the actual difference? Well, so the point of understanding here is the real difference between mixing and mastering is the same difference between all of the steps within the production process: context and perspective. So what this means is that if we're at a different stage or a different step of the stage, meaning mixing versus mastering, mixing, we're using those tools, but we're actually focused on individual tracks and how everything's working together. But mastering, we're actually focused on the entire mix and how it's actually going to translate to the world. Okay, cool. So now the question to answer is, how do we use the production process to make the sound in our head come out of the speakers? And this is typically the 3 steps, okay? We have a traditional workflow here. The pre-production goes into production, which goes into post-production. And again, that's just the planning, the doing, and then the finalizing. So the Noisemakers way is when you have that idea and use those 3 steps to develop the idea and make it better. Meaning the pre-production process goes into the production process, which goes into the post-production process, but that might mean we actually get to a point where we need to sort of rethink some things, and that's okay. So a better way to think about this, okay, is if we take that traditional approach, but we're actually applying all 3 steps within each individual stage. And the reason why we like to work like this is simply because we can, right? We actually have the ability now to get an idea and fully produce a track just to realize like, maybe it's not working as well as we thought we would. And then we can strip it back down again and kind of keep redoing things. Okay, so a perfect example of this might actually be, well, we didn't start with the lyrics in the pre-production process. We just started like with a really good track or like a really good sound that inspired us. That's great. So now revisit that as we continue going through the pre-production process, and then we can mix things a little bit and then we can master things a little bit, just slightly. Don't spend a lot of time on it, but just to give us a vision of what it's going to sound like in the next step, because that'll give us the most insight on what needs to change and what can actually be built upon. And that reminds me to remind you to always ask questions. You're not the only person who has a question on any given topic, so do not hesitate to ask us questions on our YouTube channel. The more questions that are asked, the better we can tailor the upcoming courses within the Noisemakers Academy to better help the community grow and feel supported. Okay, so that was a lot of information, but remember, this is just a brief overview of the production process, and we're actually going to dive deeper and deeper and deeper into everything that we just talked about as we continue throughout the production process, throughout the levels. Okay, cool. We'll see you there.